In 1912, antiquarian and bibliophile Wilfrid Voynich acquired an unassuming book at an auction, and upon closer inspection, it appeared to be a medieval manuscript. As Voynich studied the manuscript, he discovered that the language used did not match any known language on Earth, and had depictions of plants and animals that appeared to have never existed. Voynich would spend the next 7 years attempting to decipher this centuries-old codex. But just where did this book come from? And furthermore, what secrets lie in its pages? Come with me as we delve into the mystery of the Voynich Manuscript. The Voynich Manuscript is generally agreed to be a codex. Before modern books, there were codices, which used vellum or papyrus instead of paper, and it is by carbon dating the vellum pages of the Voynich Manuscript that we get a rough date of when it was written, the early 15th century. Some of the 240-page manuscript's contents are believed to be related to the herbal medicine, astronomy, cosmetology, and some sections relating to the pharmaceutical, with what appear to be recipes. Complementing the indecipherable words are just as equally bizarre and fantastical hand-painted images. These images range from depictions of flowers and zodiacs to things that we don't even know what they're supposed to represent. As mentioned before, we know roughly that the manuscript was written in the early 15th century, sometime between 1404 and 1438 in Italy. The original author is unknown, and in fact the first 200 years of the book's history is entirely unknown. The first place the book is known to be is in Prague in the 1600s, in the hands of alchemist Georg Bersch. Bersch was apparently puzzled by the codex and asked Antonius Kircher, who had claimed to decipher the Egyptian hieroglyphs, to try and decode the manuscript. After Bersch's death, the manuscript ended up in Kircher's possession, where it remained until 1870. It was then acquired by Petrus Becks, who stored it at Gillane College. By the early 20th century, the college was short on money, and held an auction in 1912, which is where Wilfrid Voynich came to own it. After Wilfrid's death in 1930, his widow Ethel Voynich inherited it. Ethel died in 1960 and gave the manuscript to her friend Anne Nill. She promptly sold the book to book dealer Hans P. Krauss, who in 1969 donated the manuscript to Yale University, where it resides today. There has been a lot of speculation surrounding the author of the Voynich manuscript. One theory proposes that philosopher Roger Bacon created the manuscript. Roger Bacon was known for writing a vast amount of books in his day, many of which are lost today. This theory was believed by Wilfrid Voynich, but it has since been determined that there is no way Roger Bacon could have been the author, as, thanks to carbon dating, we now know the approximate age of the manuscript as being written in the early 1400s, and Roger Bacon lived between 1220 and 1296 AD. Another theory says that the manuscript was fabricated by Voynich himself, and at first it makes sense. Voynich was known as an antiquarian and a book dealer, and a lost manuscript by Roger Bacon, which he had claimed had written it, would have been very valuable and worth a fortune. If the manuscript was a forgery, Voynich would not only have the knowledge of medieval books and codices, but would also very likely have the materials to make a realistic forgery. But again, carbon dating the vellum pages reveals that the pages were in fact made in the 15th century, and it would have been nearly impossible for Voynich to get so much blank vellum that was made 500 years previously to create the forgery. The words used in the Voynich manuscript are unlike any language that has ever existed. While some letters do repeat in ways that appear to make words, some have claimed that the manuscript might be a cipher. For most of the 20th century, this was the prominent theory. The only problem is that ciphers in general were basic and rudimentary in the 15th century, often just replacing one letter with another in what is called a substitution cipher. Nothing on the scale and complexity of the Voynich manuscript has ever been encountered. Some scholars say that it's a lesser form of Latin shorthand and could only be read by the original author or his contemporaries. Still others even debate if the manuscript was written in a natural language or constructed solely for this specific manuscript. If the manuscript does in fact use a constructed language, then that brings up the theory that it's actually a hoax from the Middle Ages. In 2007, author Andreas Skinner published a book supporting the hoax hypothesis, saying, "The manuscript's text is more consistent with meaningless gibberish rather than with Latin and medieval German texts. It has also been said that the manuscript is too elaborate and sophisticated for a medieval scholar to produce, from the high costs of making a book or codex in the 15th century to producing a constructed language for the sole purpose of being used in this manuscript and nowhere else. It would have been too expensive to produce as a hoax. As it stands today, the Voynich Manuscript remains a centuries-old mystery to this day.